introducing you and presenting Katie Keister. How are you doing today, Katie?
Just great, thanks.
Katie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you became an artist?
I probably became an artist reluctantly, but it just seemed like I loved fibers. I grew up in a family that did quilting and knitting, and I always had fibers around me, and it just sort of came out. And then when you start creating things, you start creating big piles of things.
Okay.
And then you have to get rid of them. So you give them away, and then eventually my daughter said, well, Mom, why don't we make this official or legal or whatever? So that's when I became more serious about my art. So.
And how long have you been making art, Katie? It sounds like you've been doing it
all my life, right? But I've been focusing on felting, which is what I'm currently doing, for about 20 years.
Okay, so can you explain to us a little bit more extensively about your practice? And I know felting is not easy. Can you talk to us about what concerns you in your work?
Actually, felting is very easy. Right. Actually, felting is very easy. Once you know the principle of taking wool and putting it together, and so for instance, you have probably felted a sweater in the dryer. When you take a sweater and you put it in the dryer and it becomes smaller and denser, you have felted. So it's actually very easy to do, whether you want to do it or not. But the process I use mostly is to take the fibers, the wool fibers, and embed them in silk fabric.
Oh, that sounds.
And when you've embedded them, you can then felt them down, so then they come down, and you get this wonderful texture on the silk, because the silk gets pulled along, and so you get these wonderful textures, as well as then you can play with the colors and shapes and things like that. So it's actually a very easy medium to work with once you understand it.
Can you explain to us what are some of the artworks that we are going to see when we look at you and your work in this festival?
Well, mostly what I have done is scarves. I sort of started with scarves, so they're silk and wool scarves that are multicolored and textured.
Is it possible for you to show one to us?
I can. I don't know how to.
Yeah, that's it. It's good. That's good enough. How long are they, or what are the dimensions?
This is 32 inches long, 72. They're usually about 5 or 6 feet long and vary between 10 and 15. So you can sort of wear them both as a shawl or as a scarf.
And they're very warm, very warm.
They are, because silk, even though it's very thin, it's very warm.
Will you please hold that up again so we can look at the colors that you have in there?
Okay. How's that? Does that help?
Yes, that's lovely. I see green and indigo. I see purple.
So these are squares of something I make called a pre-felt. So I make a pre-felt with the wool, and then I embed it in the silk, and so you can't see it on the other side. It's just on top of the silk. But
that's good.
I patchwork it.
Will you have other items in the festival that you've created?
Yes. So I have scarves. I have purses. So I do. This is a felted purse with silk underneath. You can do all wonderful surface designs. So there's this one. This one I actually embedded the colored felt and then embroidered on top of it. So it's
Beautiful.
you can do a lot. You can do a lot with felt. So I have purses, bags, scarves. One of the things I really have enjoyed lately is taking wool as a fleece. So when it comes off the sheep, it's called a fleece. And you can, so here's just a little piece of a fleece. So this is like what was on the sheep. This is a particular breed of sheep called a Wensleydale. There's also a breed of sheep called a Masham. And they have this wonderful long curly fleeces, and I put them together into almost like a boa. So and then I dye them. So they're just these wonderful furry, I call them furry fleeces, because they're natural, but you can wear them. So that's my most fun thing I've done lately is play with just the fleece as it comes off and I embed it in the silk up at the top.
Yeah, it looks like llama hair to me. Llama hair. It's interesting. The length of it.
It's I don't have any, but some of it can be 12 inches long. And if you look up Masham sheep, they look like these hairy, it's like you wouldn't want to have to comb it. It's just these corkscrew locks, but they're
just gorgeous though.
They are, and they have a beautiful sheen to them. So it's really fun to work with something that's very natural. I do my own dyeing, but I also like to keep things in the natural color of the fleece. So those are the things.
I really love your palette. Can you explain to us what is your most often used palette? What colors do you often use?
It's kind of depending on my mood, but my daughter is always pushing me into oranges and teals, and I find I can't work with a color I don't like. And so I speak towards the jewel tones. So you'll notice the scarf I held up earlier is mostly purples and fuchsia with some olive in it. So I use complementary colors. I love working with teal, lime greens. One year I just did the colors of sky, as in the Isle of Skye. My daughter and I had visited the island, and just looking at the landscape there, it's these rich earth tones, but olives and blues and fuchsias and yellows, and just trying to work with those colors that we see in nature. That's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I see the color wheel behind you. Can you tell me what's behind you? Tell us about everything we're looking at.
I use the color wheel a fair amount, but I can show you that this is the color wheel that I made with wool. So these I started with red wool, yellow wool, and blue wool, and then just blended it in my fingers. So I put a little bit of yellow and red and basically made the color wheel with just those three colors of wool.
So yes, and then three colors.
Yeah, so when I'm working on something in this color palette, I'll take the colors that are next to each other on the color wheel.
Right.
And that will be the predominant, and then I'll pop across the color wheel just for a little interest. It makes, if you have these colors,
it pop.
It makes it pop, and it really gives depth to your work. one of the things I love to do is layering. So I will layer
Okay.
wool, and then I'll put some silk fibers, and then I'll add on some purple locks from sheep, just to build up the layers and just make it more interesting.
So how many layers would your average pieces consist of?
Well, if I go back to this scarf that I held up for you, it probably has silk on the bottom and then wool, and then I use 2 or 3 layers. And sometimes I will take, I'm trying to find something on here. I'll take I hand print my own silk patterns on the silk. So I might take a square of a certain pattern silk fabric and then just put a pop of wool on top of that. So you've got the silk that's patterned and then maybe a dot of wool. So you're building up interest.
Okay. And what are those white works that I'm looking at behind you?
These are 3-dimensional tiles. So this just shows you some of the things that you can do with wool. It's all felted together, but there are layers. So when I felted it, it was had resists, and I felted it all together. But then you get these wonderful textures and 3-dimensional structures. So it's almost like sculpture.
Right. It is sculpture. It's like soft sculpture.
Yeah. So I just play with these, and then I discovered, because I always thought I loved working with color, because color is just everything. And so when I started doing these, and it's just white, I surprised myself at how much I enjoyed just white and playing with the shapes. So this is one. There are just a lot of structural things you can do to make one color, but 3-dimensional. So these are tiles. I don't know if I'll have any of these in the show. I had them a couple years ago.
Okay, but you will have scarves, and you will have purses, and you will have the boas.
I'll have the furry boas. Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say to us before we go?
Well, I really appreciate how hard you all are working to keep the artists, to support the arts and the artists during this time when it's pretty hard to have face-to-face interactions. I mean, I love the sale because I love talking to people about what I do.
Right.
And because it's very interactive, and usually I have the materials I work with, which are silk and wool, and the kids come up and play with it. And you can, teaching is really a passion of mine, so I love being able to, but I can't do that this year. And I've missed that, but I appreciate what you're trying to do to keep us going and to keep us before the public, and keep something going till next year when life is less complicated.
Well, Katie, I want to thank you for sharing yourself, because when you share your art, you share yourself.
Yes.
You so generously shared your process and your thoughts of how you create, and welcome us into your space, which is, although we don't have the festival, that is a very special, unique thing that most collectors don't see and don't get an opportunity to experience. And so I just want to thank you for participating, and I love your work. And we want to thank everybody. We want you to make sure you look at Katie's work and that you take something home with you.